I would never think to do research that's just from my own idea or just from the literature and that I want to publish papers from.
Yep.
And that could be, I don't know if that is naive as an early career researcher or PhD student, but that's just not where I come from. And that's not my, I guess, academic philosophy. So impact is really important to me, and I always came with that in mind.
That was the voice of Olivia Bramley, the guest on this episode of The Knowledge Mill. I'm your host, Greg Yoakum. Olivia Bramley is a PhD student at RMIT University and a member of the Sport Innovation Research Group, specializing in the area of sport ecology. Prior to undertaking her PhD, Olivia completed a Bachelor of Sport and Exercise Science with honors at Nottingham Trent University in the UK. Olivia's PhD studies explore the role of sport organizations to operate within the planetary boundaries and to respond to climate change. Specifically, she aims to bring together and engage all stakeholders in sport to develop regenerative sport that is harmonious with the natural environment. Olivia's current research interests center around research that enhances the positives of sport. She has been involved with multiple research projects as a research assistant across a range of topics, including sport performance, mental health in sport, and sport for development. Outside of her academic career, Olivia is a full-time professional footballer, playing in the WSL2 Women's Championship in England. Her signing with Durham FC occurred after we spoke, and so it's fun to hear her discuss her hopes for her football career in this episode. Owing to her dual career, Olivia describes herself as being somewhere between surviving and thriving. Her journey is a unique one, but she notes that she is a true believer in creating your own path and owning all that goes with it. This episode of The Knowledge Mill was recorded on November 29th, 2023 on the campus of the University of Canberra during the 29th Annual SMANS Conference. Show notes, including links to more information on some of the topics that Olivia and I discuss, can be found at theknowledgemill.com/episode 9. That's episode and the numeral 9. Hello, Olivia.
Hi.
Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. It's been a year in the making because we were meant to speak last year at SMANS, and I unfortunately got sick, and people can probably hear that I'm still getting over, not the same sickness, but a sickness.
Yeah.
Let's just dive right in. How is your conference going?
Good. I've actually never been to Canberra before, so being here in Canberra is very nice. And although the weather was meant to be very stormy, it's actually been relatively nice outside. And this year I was presenting. So last year SMANS was like my first conference. So in February will be 2 years I've been doing my PhD. So yeah, SMANS last year, 2022, was my first experience. And as a Swinburne student at the time, I'm now at RMIT. And a part of the SERG Sport Innovation Research Group, we obviously all kind of helped to chip in to make it run smoothly. So I chaired a lot of sessions last year, which is a very different experience for me coming to a different state as well, because last year it was in Melbourne, so I went home every night, and whereas now I'm like, we've got this nice Airbnb and we're all sharing, and then nice to see people a second time round as well, and probably be a bit more comfortable. Still have a bit of imposter syndrome, but a bit less imposter syndrome, be comfortable around like my position here as like a PhD student and maybe like an early career researcher, and have like really engaging conversations. It's been fun so far, and I've presented this year, so it was nice to do. Yeah,
nice. I'm sorry to say, or at least in my case, the imposter syndrome never really goes away. It just
tingles,
lessened and lessened, but
just shouts a little bit less. But
always
sometimes whispers.
Yeah, that's right. Just the nature of the beast, I guess. Mm-hmm. Well, I do want to chat to you today about your presentation, which you just gave about 30 minutes ago. But maybe it would be best to hear your story first and what your PhD is all about. So how did you find yourself doing a PhD?
Yeah, good question. So I did my undergrad obviously from the UK originally. So I did my undergrad at Nottingham Trent University, pretty much traditional sports kind of person, did sports science, went along that pathway. But I was very quickly a keen being at university. Like I was just so interested in research, absolutely just loved learning. And like, people are like, I hate hour or 2 hour lectures. And I just loved it. I just loved content. I loved information. Have such a passion for sport. So to be able to do that and then learn like scientific concepts and theory at the same time was just like a dream. So then I was like, okay, I want to do this, like maybe looking at a master's, or just really investing in the research side. And that's when I did a dissertation, which I am going to be publishing. Well, it should hopefully, it's been submitted for minor revisions, so let's see how that goes. But yeah, so got into research and kind of set myself up to go into research. And then I always imagined I'd do a master's first.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the UK, it's a bit more expected. You don't usually jump into a PhD, but the Bachelor's in England comes with an honours. So I think here in Australia that converted a bit differently. And then I was originally going to do a PhD in mental health and women's sports. That's what my undergrad and dissertation's in. Kind of a personal passion, I guess, as well. And I did actually get offered a PhD at ECU that I was enrolled into, and just a few weeks before my enrolment, I decided it actually wasn't the right opportunity for me, purely just because of the research space, and I didn't quite feel that that's what I wanted to invest my time in as a PhD student.
Yeah.
And I was introduced to one of my supervisors through someone from NTU. So I was sent some literature in sport ecology, so sport and the environment, which I'm really passionate. Like, I'm obsessed with David Attenborough. That's where my probably passion for the environment has come, and I love being outdoors, and I love like playing sport, and obviously without an environment to do that in, obviously can't really play. I got sent some work, and that was by Brian McCullough, and I was just really engaged with it straight away. So what my PhD is based on, the wave model and the wave typology. That was the first piece of work I read.
Okay.
And just thought it was so interesting. It really resonated with me. I thought the ideas were digestible. They made sense. I could see them in the industry. So that sparked that. And I touched base with Brian and said, hi, I really like your work. Would love to chat more. I'm really not familiar with this space. Even sport management, like I said, I come from more exercise science and sports psych. That was kind of what I was invested in at that time. And then Brian just threw out, hey, why don't you do a PhD? Like, why don't you come? And he did say, come to Texas. And but I literally just moved to Australia. I think I've been here 9 months, 12 months on a working holiday visa. And I kind of didn't want to leave at that point. So I was like, I am looking for a PhD here. Texas is a bit scary. So Brian kindly introduced me to Emma Sherry. And so I'm very fortunate now to actually work with both of them. So we did manage to still bring Brian on board as an external supervisor, which is good because they're like my academic mum and dad, and I'm very grateful to have supervisors like them both. That's how I got into it. And again, here Emma's was very similar, very receptive, kind of acknowledged I'd done some RA work before, so acknowledged that I was competent to do a PhD, because I was very much like, I haven't done a master's, are you sure? And but no, I had transferable skills, and I think that was a bit difficult at first, not having much management or business knowledge.
Right.
Because I didn't even have one module in management. It was, like I said, all kind of exercise science, and the
fields are quite different.
Yeah. And I'm probably very, I don't know how to phrase it, but kind of a social person, not a socialist, but so concepts in management and business and things like that. At first I was like, oh gosh, this is very new, and it just not really occurred to me. But obviously once you delve into the literature and you attend industry things and you talk to people and you come to conferences, you quickly pick it up. So that's how I got into my PhD. That's my overview. I think
Nice. Well, speaking of your two supervisors, you and I were having a chat earlier today about kind of how Brian is maybe a dreamer a bit, and you have that side of you as well. But then Emma brings you both down to earth, and you were saying how you appreciated that. Yeah.
They're definitely a good tag team. That's why I always say they're like my academic mum and dad.
Yeah.
It's like Emma, is definitely really supportive, and can provide real holistic support as well as academic and content support, and really supports that direction of what is the scope of my project and things like that. And then me and Brian can sometimes get carried away with the content and the future of what we want to do in sports ecology, and let's write this down to do as a side project or do this, and we just bounce new ideas around quite often. But it's definitely, I have to remind myself and to be the dot sometimes. I think like we were saying, we were talking earlier, and I think going into a PhD, I think this is a shared thing, but you always think you can change the world, or your PhD is going to make a huge difference. And it's funny, hearing Tracy's presentation today on impact. So it is true, like you definitely need to, and you can have impact through your PhD, and especially how you perhaps work with your sample, even if you don't have an industry partner, just how you engage with the industry. And then obviously your publications from that and your deliverables and anything you can disseminate. But at the same time, it is a thesis and it's a very unique piece of work. It's not like anything else. So you do need to finish it, and you do need a strict scope, and which I'm still working on bringing mine back down to earth sometimes. But yeah, so.
Yeah, eventually you will have to submit it, and then it will
exactly.
be...
The perfect PhD thesis is a finished one, right?
That's right.
So
That's right.
Don't want too much going on in there.
Well, so bring us up to speed. Listeners in the intro would have heard basically an abstract of your research, but just walk us through what you're doing and where you are with it. Yeah,
so like I said, I'll be coming up to 2 years in February. So just finished my first round of data collection, really, which was some interviews. So it's really broad, like I said, probably relates to the big thinking, but just broadly looking at environmental sustainability and how it's adopted within sport organisations and the sports sector. Pretty much, yeah, like I said, there is broad concepts a part of it, but it is focusing on more like professional sports. So I'm very aware that community sports are a part of this picture, but kind of where I'm looking at the adoption of environmental sustainability, it is within organisations that I guess operate as like more businesses.
Yep.
And really, taking a real broad perspective of that change process. So how do we get from A to B? So A is business as usual, sport not considering the environment, not considering their impact, not being climate adaptive, having very degrading anti-environment behaviours. That might be lots of waste or not renewable energy, things like that. And not really investing in things like the circular economy, to then get into B, which is, circular economy principles, really considering how we can be regenerative sport. And Regen Melbourne actually are doing a lot of work in the space from a city point of view, but that's some of my ideas, or what I've started to go into is thinking about how those principles apply in sport in my PhD as well. So that's, it's a case study. So case study of the MCG precinct, which is like the beating heart of Melbourne.
Yep.
So it's a really unique case to look at this phenomenon, and delve into some of the ideas really in depth, like I said, because it is a broad question. There's lots of different angles to it, which I am teasing through at the moment, just as I'm kind of somewhere in my analysis stage. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. And so, because you were mentioning in your presentation that the MCG being the Melbourne Cricket Ground, which is north of 100,000 net capacity, right?
Yep.
It's the biggest stadium in Australia, by capacity. But it's within its own precinct there in Melbourne. And so you were kind of talking about how it's sort of its own system.
Yeah, so officially, I think I've kind of come up, I don't know, I don't want to accidentally claim this, it's not me, but I definitely have framed the MCG precinct, that's not an established necessary thing, like it's not actually so if you look at the MOPT, Melbourne Olympic Parks, that is very definitive, and that's what that's known for, that is its own precinct, whereas the MCG precinct is, I guess, something I've kind of developed a little bit. So MCG is situated in Yarra Park, and that's why it's like the People's Ground, and it's Crown land, it's owned by the local government, so it's governed by the MCG Trust, which is board of trustees that, again, like I said, influenced by the local government. So really unique in that sense, but also it has its tenant clubs because it is a venue for hire. So then again, that relates to that you can really look at those different stakeholder relationships. And within my sampling or stakeholder map, I've not included national sport organisations like the AFL, for example, or international organisations like the IOC, or they're not explicitly within my stakeholder map, but they're, like on the diagram and presentation, they're in grey because they're obviously key influences. Yeah. And we are seeing that in the data, like their influence, but they're not what I'm directly talking to at the moment. So the MCG precinct is a really good way of looking at the governance level, so from a local government point of view as well, and a board level, and then looking at the operations of match day operations plus day-to-day. So the MCG has its own day-to-day, you go and work, you turn the light on, but also its tenant clubs have their match day operations. So it's really unique to be able to look at all those different areas, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just for a listener who may not know, who are some of those tenant clubs? You got some of the AFL teams.
Yeah, so there's quite well, obviously there's different ones that play there, and the AFL Grand Finals usually will play there. But
Yep.
yeah, there's 4 AFL clubs, and then the cricket is also included in that. So that's where actually it's not blurred lines, but it's interesting because Cricket Australia, like I said, it's an international, a national organisation, but it's actually kind of a part of that 10 club system.
Right.
Because obviously they play there. So yeah, it's been quite hard to define at times and work out what exactly is within my scope. But yeah, I've slowly got there.
Yeah. Are you finding, this kind of aligns with the question you got in your presentation actually, are you finding that there's alignment across all these tenant clubs with the MCG and what they're doing for sustainability, or is there some disconnect there?
Yeah, there's a lot of disconnect.
Okay.
And yeah, like I said, I will be delving into my data a little bit more to try and examine some of the contextual factors that perhaps lead into more or less adoption. My initial gut at the moment is that there isn't much, it's not very systematic. Like there's not things that stand out that go, okay, if A happens, B happens. Like it's not really, it's a real interaction of all these, like kind of a complex system and all these factors that come together. And yeah, there's definitely an element of change agents and champions of change from like internal drivers. But again, I don't know why. My question is always, okay, why does X organisation have one of those that's driving it and B organisation doesn't?
Right.
Is that by chance, or is that something to do with the organisation? Because what we've been talking about recently is some of the HR benefits of being invested in environmental sustainability. So the satisfaction you get from working at a workplace that is invested in the environment,
right,
and how much you want to work there more. So does that attract more staff? Again, I don't know, questions that are probably beyond the scope of my PhD as well. But yeah, not too sure at the moment, perhaps why some adopt and don't.
Yep.
It's definitely an element of to do, like I said, there's a strong commercial logic coming across the board. That's probably one of the things that's consistent. And whether that's a hindrance or like enabler is probably the difference between different clubs. So if you have a commercial logic but based on a perhaps more of a social brand, then environmental sustainability is adopted more likely, which I think makes sense. You know, if you have more interest and investment in social causes and social impact, then that's where environmental sustainability comes in. But then on the flip side of that is it its own concept? Probably not. Because it's not just one person to deal with the environment. There's certain systems where you need skills. So if you have an environmental management system, having an environmental or sustainability manager is important,
right,
and perhaps to lead some of the projects. But at the same time, what we want to see, or like I said, what refers to that more regenerative sport and that more advanced adoption is how it disseminates through an organisation. So, you know, within the marketing department, like it needs to be on their forefront of the mind just naturally, or embedded across finance, across the procurement, facilities team, match day team, all of that. Even to the extent of, me and Emma always talk about, what do you do with medical waste? You know, how much tape do you see footy players with shoulder tape on all the time?
Yeah.
What are we doing with that? So it is from really small things to that broader strategy. But yeah, bringing it back to your question, it's not very consistent. There's definitely commendable efforts. Like I said, I think a built facility and some of the initiatives they do, they're probably like the more developed organisations or space that it's happening in. But then at more of club level, probably there's still the early structuration, and that's what in Europe they did some research. Tibero Daddy and did looking at European football context, and they found very similar, like very wave one early initiatives, like a bit reactionary, low hanging fruit. But then today I was having a conversation with Hannah, who was saying some of the stuff that AIC are doing, so the Australian Olympic Committee, and it sounds like they're being really advanced, and that is disseminating across then the events that fall under the AOC. And again, from a mega event point of view, we're talking about a green positive Brisbane 2032 games. So that's where you go, oh wow, that's great, but what is the reality of that?
Sounds nice.
Yeah, how does that actually end up looking like in practice? And I think that's probably where is the space to be a bit more critical of, perhaps.
Because there's been a trend, right, speaking of the games, because the next two will be hosted by cities that have hosted before, mostly using venues that already exist. And it's kind of driven by this environmental consideration, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's like one aspect of it, but like we'll again, some of the presentations touched on today and what we had before this, like even coming to a conference, you're flying so many spectators and fans, and again, there is some work out there, Brian's just doing everything, but some of Brian's other work, but also we always talk about Scope 3 emissions just within industry and academia, is like looking at them externalities. So if you host a mega event, like really great for tourism, well, I don't know if it actually, I don't know the science behind that, especially
they say it is.
Aaron's this morning, but there's some benefits to that, but then hotels are going to be using more energy, there's more food, there's more weight, there's all these extra things we don't consider. So it's really difficult to go, especially at that Scope 3 level, to assess that and go, can we claim that this is, positive for the environment? And it is really tough, and that's where it's good to be critical, but also from a point of view where we're not calling out sport, or at least I'm not, and I don't ever intend to do that through my research. No, we want to actually support sport to be better. And any improvement is being better. So that's kind of, my perception. One
of the interesting points, from my view, in your presentation was that the most straightforward answer to the negative outcomes, environmental outcomes from sport would be to just not play sport anymore. But obviously we don't want to do that. There are many social and other benefits to having sport in society. And so that's because you talked a bit about a tug of war in different dimensions. Is that kind of where your focus is with the MCG? The MCG is your case study, the MCG precinct. Are you looking at the influence that the MCG, and you said they're a little more sophisticated in terms of their sustainability initiatives, the impact that is having on their tenant clubs, or kind of the back and forth relationship between them? Where are you with that?
So I didn't present on that today, but one of my research question 3 is to explore the interorganizational relationships within that stakeholder network. So it's a two-way. Well, initially I came in thinking, I'll look at the two-way process and even some of the perhaps power dynamics between the organisations and how that influences something like adopting environment sustainability. And like I said, being a venue for hire, that is an implication in itself. And what the data is showing so far, or at least what I've analysed, is the influence of those doing more is higher. So perhaps some of the organisations with more sophisticated strategies or doing more initiatives, because they can legitimise their behaviours or they're perceived as more authentic, that then they have more influence, they're perhaps looked to more. So that's where some of the other organisations might look to them, and that's how it's diffused. So you have your early adopters from a theoretical point of view, but at face value, there's so many things that implicate that. So we're looking at, or one of the things that need to delve into is, the MCG at the moment, they've got some really good policies for the tenant clubs. So you have to select certain boxes, and sustainability are ones in that. So that's fantastic. Okay. Yeah. So they do have a little bit of influence there. Well, if you're going to play here, you actually need to be doing X, Y, Z from a sustainability point of view. Yeah. But there are instances where maybe that doesn't always happen. So if some, especially if other third parties are involved, or if you are looking for a sustainable partner, even food vendors or sponsor, and it's like, we don't really know, and that's probably what sporting clubs and organisations, facilities are struggling with, is there's not enough availability at the moment. Yeah. So there might be one environmental sustainability food vendor versus 5 others. So it's very difficult to say we want to do something and the needs are not actually met. Yeah. But that's where, the more influence, and hopefully that will be where it goes. Yeah. Slowly.
Because it would be certain things about the bins, for example, if they sort the rubbish into recycling and all of that, clubs are not bringing their own bins in. So you'd like to think is that might transfer then the mentality of, we have this infrastructure in place, you have to use this infrastructure. And is that where the waves come in then, that you're exposed to this, maybe it opens your eyes to it? And
Yep, absolutely. So that's where that waves typology is built on the diffusion of innovation. So learning, and then the pressures, so your normative pressures and your mimic pressures, and a bit of isomorphism, so you're starting to copy and just become the same. But actually, again, sometimes it translates, but it also doesn't. So it actually becomes more, what we found in some of our data is it's almost like a handball off. So didn't mean to do an AFL link there, but yeah, so say in the built facility, you have these bins, and I'm actually your fans, but you need to activate your fans to use those bins properly. So we could go to a game, you might put your can in the recycling, and I might put my can in the bin.
Right.
So, the MCG doesn't have a big following. So is that the club's responsibility, or is it the MCG's responsibility to make better signage? Like, again, their questions, I'm not necessarily, don't know. And it's not anyone's fault or anything. It's just some of the things that we need to consider. But equally, it's almost like, well, the operations are left to, for example, in this case, the MCG on match day, brilliant, but that doesn't necessarily mean it translates into the workplace. And you think, me in finance might not even go to that footy game and see the bins myself. Yeah. So, and again, that's where the messaging and the maybe organisational values are coming in, and that's what we were just chatting to before. That individual level is what I hope to delve into a little bit more. So, next phase of my PhD will be trying to put a survey out there to have a look at that. To look at how we can disseminate those values, so then those behaviours are consistent, and that's between organisations and then within organisations, from like within departments or senior management to everyone else, or champion of change upwards. Yeah,
because you have a hunch that's not all the individual values are not necessarily aligned with. Yeah,
absolutely. And like the fourth wave I spoke to today is like the moralization logic. So doing the things because it's the right thing to do, not because of returns of investment or the commercial benefits, and really bringing cohesion between organisational values, operations, and those behaviours. To some extent, like I said, the influence is there and the social pressures are and the normative pressures. So there is to some extent that is happening, but also on a perhaps more practical real life, what does that actually look like? We're not too sure yet.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. It's the scope of your PhD is makes me a little insecure about mine, which was just one organization of 6 people.
No, I wish I had a smaller one.
It has its own challenges to go smaller. Well, we saw a keynote earlier today. Tracy Taylor was talking about, you mentioned this already, the 3 different kinds of impacts that we could have. And it occurred to me that you are ticking all 3 of those. You've got academic impact, social impact, and industry impact. So that must have made you feel good about at least...
I did actually just say to Tracy that I thought her presentation was very inspiring and uplifting. But I don't know if it's just off the back of the AI chat we had yesterday, which was a bit more daunting. And I was like, what career do we have in academia? I thought,
right.
And then it's like, no, you have impact. And I'm a real big believer in that. I would never think to do research that's just from my own idea or just from the literature and that I want to publish papers from. Yep. And that could be, I don't know if that is naive as an early career researcher or PhD student, but that's just not where I come from. And that's not my, academic philosophy. So impact is really important to me, and I always came with that in mind. I think actually in my COC, that was maybe one of the difficult things because it was quite industry led, or I was trying to listen to a lot of industry problems. And like I said, having conversations before or at the early start of my PhD with just informative conversations with people in these organisations or environmental summits and saying what are your barriers? What's going on? What do you need to know? Why is this not happening? Just generally getting a good idea. And then that kind of obviously led me to certain literature perhaps, or made me think about how I was presenting my ideas. And then in my COC, it goes, okay, what's your theoretical contribution? Is that clear enough? So probably over the past 6 months, that's been something I've been conscious of. And I think that's where data helps, because now I'm relating my data back to the literature. So from an academic impact point of view, that's what I'm trying to do now, is develop the model and making sure I can speak to the theoretical underpinnings. But at the same time going, well, we research for the world. If I'm just researching for me, what's the point? Bringing it back to making sure it's real life. And I think the case study is perfect for that because it has direct implications. But like I said in my presentation today, I do think the MCG precinct is really interesting in terms of, like I said, it creates its own sports system. And that could be a visionary for other sports organisations. They did some work a few years ago in Canada saying like, what is the vision? And I just think, well, that's a perfect case study to develop a vision perhaps, or at least to highlight some of the barriers and the challenges and the problems.
Yeah.
So then we can go, these are the target areas we need to address. And having naturalistic generalizations. So other organizations or in other countries, you can sit back and go, oh, there's some of the broader concepts, like what are my experiences to that, and then apply that to their own settings. So yeah, it's nice to hear you say that. So thank you. I didn't realise maybe I was having as much impact.
It's nice to hear someone else tell you that,
thank you. Yeah.
What you're thinking is.
I'm on the right tracks then.
Because I think what you're doing, speaking of these theoretical lenses that you're applying, and a management idea that we've kind of been talking around, but we haven't just said yet, is the triple bottom line, right? So environmental considerations along with financial and social. And so I think what's really interesting is that what you're doing in terms of the values, and you're bringing all these lenses in, of course, have implications for other industries, other fields of studies like organizational behavior, management, broader management to sport management. I think that's where, because one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, do you consider yourself an activist researcher?
Good question. Actually, really good question. So if we again I don't want to be such like a academic, but theoretically, my epistemology and all of that is critical theory, but broad. So obviously I'm not picking race theory or gender or anything like that, but it's very. So I am coming with a critical lens. So from that point of view, I guess I am being a bit of an activist in the sense that I do want my research to change the status quo, which is, not business as usual as we know it now.
Yeah.
But again, want to work with sport organisations. So I don't know if I probably don't do enough to be an activist. But I would like to say that I do want to create some change through my research for the better. But I'm very aware that, my perception is one perception, and that's why I'm very taking it steady and trying to absorb all the different perceptions and contexts within the sports system, because sports are faced we put a lot of responsibility on sport organisations and sport as an industry.
Yeah.
There's lots of different things we could be addressing. I think there is a space for obviously environmental sustainability, and it's unique that it's going to affect you anyway. So, you've got to respond to climate change as well as perhaps improve your own position. But it is a tease, because like I was saying earlier in my presentation as well, you do have to consider that triple bottom line. You can't do things without finances. Yep. And I do think, like I said, it links to other aspects. So you do need food vendors, you need the procurement line, you need supply chains. It is that bigger picture, and obviously that's way beyond the scope of my PhD, thankfully. And thankfully, my supervisor will be glad I'm saying that. But that's why I brought in the donut economics model. So Kate in the UK, came up with the donut. And I'm a real big kind of fan. I don't know if advocate is quite the word, but I really like that concept and how I'm trying to use some of those ideas, or just that's how I frame sustainability, because yes, my PhD is focused on environmental sustainability specifically, but you cannot neglect like we discussed at the beginning of this, our chat, is you can't neglect the social impact of sport, and you don't want it to not function, but you can't also expect things to happen without financial sustainability. So it is a broader systematic challenge. I guess my PhD will be hopefully a drop in that big ocean.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask you that, because I think you seem afraid to say or afraid to locate yourself where you actually are, from my perspective, which is that you are passionate about this. And I think that's where maybe an activist kind of mindset comes in, because I think you need to keep that. Like, it's easy in academia, not that I'm a senior academic by any means, but I look around and I see people chasing the scoreboard, trying to get citations and upping their H-index. And like Tracy said today, that's certainly part of it, because same thing. We're academics. We want to get promoted
sustainability,
and get more funding for the next project that could change the world in a different way or a bigger way or whatever. So certainly that's all part of the tug of war. But I think, if you find a way to keep that passion, I would go past saying there's nothing wrong with that and say you need that.
I definitely, I think it's just hard because I think sometimes that brings not too much excitement, but from a PhD point of view, like I said, I'm taking it probably a step back and like a steady approach with that. But I definitely think I'll try and channel that passion with other industry connections outside of my PhD. So I did some or connect with like trying to work with Regen Melbourne a bit because they've created their own donut. Applied the donut. That's what we want people doing. And so they've added a social component, which is sport, culture, like Melbourne culture, which is sport, because sport is huge in Melbourne. So just, working with those and I guess providing, again, a critical lens or a research view and just kind of contributing ideas that way to create change from that point of view. But it's definitely, I don't know, I think it's maybe being a PhD student as well. I was trying to not establish yourself, but go, I actually know something, like I'll happily contribute because, I think it's better now I have data, but especially when you're reading the literature, you're like, I don't know anything. Like I'm not an expert, like not that you're expected to be either, but I think now I'm slowly finding things and I've digested the landscape that I'm more confident to say, actually, this is like what I think, or is this is what the data is saying, like Tracy was saying earlier, using the data I have to go, this is the evidence, so this is what the way we should perhaps go forward. But until I collected my own data, I didn't quite feel in a position to share or voice as much, be as much of an activist. So maybe more will come.
It's easy to forget when you're doing a PhD that you are still a student. You're still learning and growing.
Still a baby. I looked around the room today. I think it was in one of the early enlightening talks or keynotes. I was just looking around. I was like, I think I could probably be the youngest person in this room.
Right.
Like obviously not saying anyone looked old. Just like I do. Like I said, I kind of came from undergrad straight to PhD, barring 1 year. So I think a lot of it is perhaps a bit deep, but a lot of it is finding my voice is just me, and then on top of that, then as an a PhD student, early career researcher. So I'm just like absorbing everything as I've gone along and trying to find my confidence or find my feet and talk to people and take inspiration from those around me that I think do it really well. Like I really admire Casey and her work and how she speaks and like how she even like content posting and just trying to voice more things. Like it's so that's what I just will develop eventually to add to that kind of activist role perhaps, but bit by bit.
Gotcha. You know Lyndon, don't you?
Yes.
Lyndon, listeners would have heard her maybe on a different episode. I spoke to her last year at SMANS. She's looking at ambassadorship, and she was telling me something interesting, which is when she started doing her research and looking into, okay, what are these sport organizations? It's New Zealand basketball for her. What are these organizations and these athletes doing in the social world? And she was, as she went, sharing the things that she found. And then she said what was interesting is she just sort of realized one day, now I'm an ambassador because I've just sort of gone past the tipping point, and now I'm sharing so much stuff that I'm in the system. She's
her own work, her own research. I do definitely. I think I put a LinkedIn post not that long ago talking about wanting to share more, but being a bit hesitant, especially on a platform like LinkedIn, perhaps, which is a bit more professional, or there's more senior people on that profile. And just saying it, and I was really happy. I got such a good reception of like comments being like, "Yeah, you should like just embrace this." Like like nothing. It was just general support for that kind of thing. But definitely I guess it's hard to write stuff and write your PhD.
That's true. Yeah.
I'm like, so
I don't know the people who have their platform and they doing this podcast was something I've wanted to do
say for you,
since I was doing the PhD, but there was no way it was going to happen while I was doing it. So,
and I'm a footballer, like a football player. So, it's like PhD football. What else can we squeeze out of, and do like a fair bit of RA work as well. So, there's a lot of different baskets and things I try and juggle.
You doing any teaching?
I did in my first year for both trimesters, and then I did in Try 1 this year, but Try 2 I haven't. Really actually value the break. I did enjoy teaching, but I think, like I said, at the trying to pursue like elite soccer, like football at the same time. I was just torn three ways. but I'm really glad I had that experience, and it's definitely gave me an insight into teaching. And again, thinking about Sarah's presentation in the HDR day yesterday, we talked about teaching philosophy and things like that, and I'd look to see where that goes in the future. But I've definitely enjoyed the trimester 2 break of mainly no marking more than the teaching side.
Yes, that's right. It's it's everything except the in classroom stuff that becomes time consuming. And
I'm a bit I can't say I'm the most effective marker. I don't want to say I care too much, because I think it's important to care. But I do like to make sure my students are well supported.
Right.
But maybe sometimes at the cost of supporting myself. So it's been nice to just have a bit more of a research focus the back end of this year.
Yeah. So have you thought about, do you want to go into academia after the PhD? Is that the...
Good question. Sometimes I sit and think I was born for academia. Like I said, I love learning.
Yep.
And I feel so fortunate to have worked with, and I'm working with, people in the industry that I just think are so great. Like almost fangirl like my colleagues all the time.
Yeah. You've got quite a good team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But even just beyond that, like some of the people I've met here, and even people like yourself, like I think there can be so many good researchers and academics and just good people that I really like working with. And
it's a good community.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I think is really appealing to academia as well, and really great lifestyle, like the fact that you get to learn every day, but there is opportunity to travel or, work from different places. And again, educate. What does worry me is perhaps some of the stuff we maybe touched on in the AI, like how will that develop? And, everyone has their own concerns, but also the role of education. So like I said, I was a keen being at university, but just the nature of the students perhaps I've taught, and it surprised me of how students want to learn now, and like the online digital era we're in. That's perhaps not as appealing to me. I would definitely like to stay learning, stay researching, contribute to society from that point of view. Like I said, I think my eagerness to learn is a strength of mine, not a strength, but something that works well in research, obviously.
Drives you.
So that would be nice. I do again, it's nice hearing Tracy talk about impact, because I do really value that. So working with industry and having some sort of hybrid role. Like I was talking to Lyndon actually, and Jen, who's at RMIT with me, we were saying, I don't think the career for me exists yet. Like I know what I want to do, but it's just not out there yet. So I'm very keen to pave my own way into what I want to do and try and find what works for me. But definitely at the moment, like I said, pursuing elite football at the same time. So I'm experienced like a dual career pathway. And I'm 25. So for the next 5 years, I'll obviously always have my PhD and want to keep researching, but my peak playing years are limited. So the near future is academia alongside, but football is...
you have one window of opportunity.
And it's becoming more of an obsession the more I invest. And then, I do see myself researching though for a long time. Yeah,
nice one. I'm going to work really hard for this segue. But we kind of were just talking about online learning and how maybe it's less ideal. And something that we spoke very briefly about before we started recording that I wanted to ask you about is there are all of these, of course, sustainability concerns about doing exactly what we're doing right now, which is I drove down from Sydney, you flew in from Melbourne. You mentioned that you fly in, fly out from Adelaide to Melbourne, not infrequently. There's an environmental cost to all of this, but I don't think you'd find anybody here who says they'd rather do it on Zoom. So where are you on that?
Yeah, exactly. One of my participants actually spoke about having a VR headset for going to like an NBL game, because obviously if you wanted to travel to America or even any game, like it's difficult. And that was solve problems of like buying a ticket, and you could have like a courtside experience, but then quickly reflected on like with literally in the same sentence and same conversation, but you don't want to take away the human touch or the actual experience of being courtside. And that's the same with the conference. Like we both said, if this was on Zoom, would I learn? Would I be engaging? And that's what being human is about. Like it's about social connections. Like I want to sit down and have a chat with you today, face to face, not over Zoom and Teams. And I know that from, like I said, I live in Adelaide at the moment for football. And even just doing my PhD remote I don't have the same experience that when I'm in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Mainly because I can't just knock on Emma's door and shed some tears. But just, generally, I think we can't take away the things that make us human and a human race. Like, we're not robots. We have emotions. We have affective behaviours.
Yep.
So I think that's where we do have to be a bit more innovative. I want to use that word loosely because I feel like it's a bit of a buzzword sometimes, but we need to come up with solutions that protects the environment, but enables us to thrive as human beings and get the most out of that. And I flew here and I did offset my flights, and I was saying to you earlier, we ran an event at RMIT where I put the QR code up where it was literally $2 per person. You can scan with Green Fleet, and they offset your emissions for the estimation of an event. And you can do it for your yearly car. There's a lot out there now where you can offset, and that is by no means a gold standard at all. So buying carbon doesn't mean that it's not harming the environment. And obviously some initiatives like that aren't as credible as others. Perhaps how many trees are planted, for example, to balance the carbon emissions. But if there are appropriate initiatives where when you buy carbon, that can go to innovative research. And funnily enough, one of my participants said, we need more research and we need more funding in research on this. I was like, yes, thank you, say that again. But if there is, or can go to initiatives that are working with communities to be regenerative, or to invest in, backing Regen Melbourne for more funding to support the project at the moment, which is making the Birrong River swimmable again. Right. So there's plenty where you can, and that's why, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's a systematic change. And we need to look at perhaps broader societal principles, which is again beyond the scope of my PhD or anyone's research probably, but collectively is how can we shift that in society. I think we're definitely perhaps at a pressure point maybe. And which way it will go, I don't know, but I hope it's transformative change, and different aspects really, but especially from an environmental point of view.
I think I know the answer to this. I think I know your answer to this. Do you think we can have it both ways ultimately? Do you think there is a middle ground?
I do. I don't know actually.
This is on the record, so.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to. Hypothetically, yes.
Yep.
The reality, I'm not sure.
Yep.
And I'm not probably going to go into any deep chats right now, but I just think sometimes I don't feel like, you feel de-empowered generally as a researcher, as a person, and there's always so many conflicting views. But at the same time, I don't think that's anything to shy away from. And I don't want to be any Greta Thunberg at all. And I always think, bringing it back to David Attenborough, but if no one's listening to David Attenborough, why is anyone going to listen to anyone else? Like, he is, he is the Lion King himself. So that's the problem. But I think collectively there is different pushes happening, and that's in all aspects. That's all in what we're trying to change for social change in society and make the world a better place to live. But it's a very tough question. It's very it's deep.
I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, I read Jane Goodall's book actually. So Dr. Jane Goodall, she is she researched chimpanzees many years ago as well, and she's still doing it. And her book's called Hope, and she says that especially working in the environment, and she's definitely seen the biodiversity loss over decades. And she said, I could almost not wake up the next day thinking about it too much and working in the space. But there is hope. There's really good stories out there.
Yeah.
And I bring it back to my PhD in sport. There's commendable efforts at the moment to make sports regenerative, or champions of change doing great things. And, look at here at SMANS, there's people invested in really great research that is addressing key problems in society. And even outside of that bubble, there's things happening. So I think there's something to hold on with hope and lean into that, because I think if you just don't, then no one's going to, if not me, then who? So
absolutely. Yeah. It's always better than doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And if you have, like I said, PhD or anything, you might not change the world, but if you change one person or one industry or one organisation, then, you know, that's something.
Yeah.
So that's in what anyone's doing, really. So hypothetically, yes, and I'd like to think so, but I don't know how we get there.
But you're looking for the way.
Something.
Yeah.
Someone can help me out. Everyone else as well.
I think this is a good place to get into my final questions because I feel like hope is a good place to leave off. The last two questions that I ask everybody, the first one is, what's on the horizon for you? Any conferences that you're looking at, and bearing in mind what we were just saying about conference attendance or publications? What's on the horizon?
Yeah, like I said, I've got some a publication submitted, but that's from previous research. I was looking at mental health in women's sport, but very, very relevant at the moment, especially as the growth of professionalisation of women's sport. So Tracy's work, Ali Bau's work at NTU, and Alex Colvin. There's lots of implications to come in. So I think that'll actually be really interesting, but is very different from my PhD. In terms of PhD, I think as my data comes, I would like to start thinking about my publications and how to disseminate some of my findings to industry as well as the academic field. Conferences, not too sure. I was initially looking at NASM and did want to submit an abstract until I realised that there was already abstracts being reviewed and I dismissed that date.
Oh, right. It's a very early deadline for that conference.
Yes, because it was going to be, I would present, like I said, perhaps some of the survey stuff I'm thinking of. So again, to show the development of my work and be able to advance those ideas that I teased on today. But yeah, I probably wouldn't have been able to write an abstract anyway. And then maybe ESOM, especially with being in Paris. Might be in Europe with some soccer stuff next year, maybe.
Oh, okay.
And with the Paralympics, I think it'll be a nice time. But yeah, I'm very much not constrained, but like I said, football and soccer is gives me strict deadlines and timelines from a training and where I'm playing in the world, essentially. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, cool. TBA.
TBA. Speaking of sports, sorry, this is a bit of a tangent, but talking about conferences and flying to conferences, there is an athlete, British athlete, I think she's like at Olympic level, but essentially would not compete in Australia because of the carbon emissions. Right. Real, strong activism. And basically to anything in Europe gets the train and cycles. So yeah, maybe my next conference I will try and not fly.
Yeah, there you go.
Plenty of people drove today, but maybe I'll try public transport and cycling only.
Yeah, there you go. And then that's, I was part of the problem because I did take a green Uber though.
Nice.
My Uber that I was in by myself was at least a green Uber, but but
yeah, that's what's on the horizon maybe. Not flying to a conference.
Yeah, there you go. That is a Greta Thunberg move, taking a ship instead of or however she does it. Yeah. Swimming. That's one of the tricky parts with Australia. Nice one. Well, the very last question, and it's maybe the hardest question that I ask, is what's something, maybe for you it's football, actually, you've already been talking about it, something not related to your PhD that you're excited about at the moment?
Yeah, there's some things brewing in the football world, but I'm not going to go into that because I'm just going to don't want to talk about that until it happens. And then on, my sister's getting this, I don't know if this is very specific, my sister's getting married.
Oh, nice.
She met her boyfriend, my soon-to-be brother-in-law, at school. So they were like 13. So they've been together 15 years. Oh, wow. And they have 2 beautiful children. And for years, we're like, Josh, when are you going to propose? It's like, no pressure, but also, please. Yeah. And they're such a beautiful couple. And yeah, so she's getting married in Cyprus in July. So
that is very exciting.
Yeah, and I think just not even from I'm obviously dead happy for her, but just to spend time with my family and my sisters have kids. I'm in Australia. Like we're all everywhere. So I can't remember our last family holiday. Right. So just to have that time with my family, and in the sun, and have something to celebrate, and just that's what I'm really looking forward to. Yeah. That'd be a really beautiful time of year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
I'm excited for you. That sounds great.
So if you want me to say yes to anything, ask me in July 2024.
When you're in the best mood.
Yeah. Anything up until then, hold off.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for sitting down with me. I really appreciate it. I said offline, maybe we can do this again in the future and see how far along things have come.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'd be really interesting to see how it evolves and where you are.
Yeah, I'd love to chat again. So fun.
Cool. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Greg.